What's up, Dragon Brood? We're going to take a look at another strategy video today where the play that decides the win is actually pretty unique and really in those lower 1% chances to ever happen again. But I think there's a lot to break down in this play that would be worth sharing, so let's hop into it and see what we're doing today. Now, first off, we're going all the way back to 2012 for a Legacy Open event in Los Angeles run by Star City Games. Tells you how long ago it was because they don't run anything on the West Coast anymore. I also want to say, for this time period, if you were playing against Mono Red, it was very common for them to be able to take you down from 13 or 14 life. So there's a lot happening here, and we're going to kind of set the stage. So just so you know all the cards that are in play that matter for the purposes of this explanation, Ross has a Wasteland, which lets him destroy any non-basic land. Now, Patrick is playing mono mountains, but it does matter here still. Ross also has a Knight of the Reliquary, which can let him tap and sacrifice a land, and the lands in the graveyard increase the power of the Knight of the Reliquary. Patrick also on his side has a bunch of mountains and a Grim Lavamancer. Grim Lavamancer lets you pay mana and tap it, and you can move cards from your graveyard to deal 2 damage to a target. Patrick also has a Sulfuric Vortex, which deals 2 damage to each player during their upkeep. He also has Flame Rift, which deals 4 damage to each player, but at sorcery speed. He has a Fire Blast, which is one of the best finishers Red had and still has technically in older formats, where you can sacrifice 2 mountains to deal 4 damage to a target. He also has Price of Progress, which deals twice the number of non-basic lands worth of damage that each player controls. Patrick also has a Chain Lightning. This will be important here shortly. Now, as we skip forward here, Ross decides to play a Qasali Pridemage, which does allow you to pay a mana, sacrifice it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. He also plays an Ethersworn Canoness, which keep your opponent from playing an additional, each player from playing an additional non-artifact spell per turn. This is going to end up being important as Patrick needs to be able to cast multiple spells in one turn to take Ross out. So to set this up, this means Patrick now has to find a way to deal 13 damage while being at 6. This does limit his choices quite a bit. Part of the problem here being that he has to get rid of the Ethersworn Canoness before he can do anything else. So at least one card in his hand has to target that. So at this stage of the proceedings, Patrick decides he has to get rid of the Ethersworn Canoness, so he uses 1 mana to deal 3 damage to it with the Chain Lightning. We do remember that we have a spell that can deal 4 damage, but you also have to do it on your turn. 2 mana is about to be spent to use the Flame Rift, but that's going to put Patrick down to 1 and then also deal damage to Ross for 4. So it puts him at 9. So here's the working scenario from here. You have a situation where we know Patrick has to use the Flame Rift. That's going to put him at 1, going to put Ross at 9. Now you do still have the looming Sulfuric Vortex, which could get Ross also down to 7. Then that leaves at least 4 damage from the Fire Blast, which is good because that puts Ross down to 3, and then you can try to use the Price of Progress. However, if Ross untaps, that does mean that he could actually use the Wasteland to get rid of one of those other lands, and additionally use the Knight of Reliquary to also get rid of another non-basic, meaning he would take no damage. Or he could leave himself with just 1 non-basic and take 2 and be at 1. Not good enough. That means Patrick still dies, because that would also put more non-basic lands into the graveyard, which would grow the Knight of the Reliquary if Ross decided to attack with it rather than use it. So this is one of those cases where Patrick kind of has to rely on your opponent making one small mistake. The only way Patrick wins here is if Ross does what most of us would do and actually try to remove the Sulfuric Vortex during Patrick's end step. So you're going to see Patrick still go ahead and do the only thing he can do here, playing to his outs, uses the Flame Rift, goes to 1. Passes the turn, and Ross goes to tap the Wasteland. This is literally the only way that Patrick can win in this scenario. Because Ross taps the Wasteland to activate the Qasali Pridemage, which kind of makes sense that he would do that to try to get rid of the Sulfuric Vortex because he doesn't want to take the damage during his upkeep. And Ross may also be thinking that, well, if Patrick has some combination of lightning bolts or something then if I take the extra 2 damage, it's going to put me closer to dying. But because Ross decided to tap this, the floodgates are open for Patrick to do the one thing he can do. So he targets a Sulfuric Vortex. Patrick immediately goes to tap his mountains, casts the Price of Progress, which is going to do 1, 2, 3 times 2 is 6, and then sacrifice 2 mountains to the Fire Blast to do an additional 4. That's a total of 10, ending the game. And I'm not gonna lie, after that handshake, poor Ross just looks shook here. And I kinda get it. You thought maybe you were making the one safe play you could make to give yourself a chance during the next turn, but turns out it was exactly what your opponent needed you to do to stay in the game. Now, the question is, could Ross have avoided this situation? Maybe, but it takes a very brave amount of thinking to get to that next step. That being said, he could untap, go to 7, and then you start questioning how can you lose. However, if he's at 7 as opposed to 9, and Patrick's just holding 2 Fire Blasts, well then he still dies. So it's kind of an ugly situation. You almost have to try to guess what you think Patrick could be playing or slow rolling after he sat there trying to do all the math and whatever. But man, this is a really tough one. So unfortunately, I might be in the same shook state that old Ross was. But this is a good example where sometimes you can only do the thing you can do. And if that's just the right play, sometimes you need your opponent to just make that mistake. And we've done it here on the channel where we say, hey, we're going to play to our outs. And if the opponent gives us an opening, we'll take it. But yeah, this is one of those really tight, really close plays that it sucks to be on the losing end of, but you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. But I thought it was neat to share. It is a nice throwback as well to show kind of what formats and tournaments used to be like once upon a time. But if you like this type of stuff, let me know. Are there any other matches I should be covering or talking about? Because I think that could be a lot of fun too. But either way, that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.